So I was playing with this game a little bit, and I noticed that we're not enforcing this. We're not enforcing the center letter for the standard game mode at all. So this is a good opportunity to look at how easy we made it to modify this configuration. Since we've got this standard validation method now, we know that for the standard game mode, we also want to see if our word does not contain the center letter, right? So I was going to say, because this script doesn't actually have a notion of this center letter, we can't use it, but that's not necessarily true. Even though these scripts live in different files, right now, these are all global variables, right? So this script, any of these scripts will have access to any of these global variables right now, which can be good and bad, right? I mean, there's issues of scope creep where, you know, we want to be intentional about our scope, and right now it's kind of clumsy what we're doing, where everything just has this same global scope where they're accessible anywhere, right? So if we wanted to be more precise about it, we would, well, first of all, these would all be classes rather than just distinct scripts. And second of all, we'd probably be more particular about what we'd probably be passing all this data that we care about into the actual methods, rather than, for example, let's look at this LAL word. Right now, we're object accessing that LAL letter directly, just assuming that we have access to it. We're not passing it into the function. We're not passing some object like, you know, current state, like a current state object, into these functions or anything. We're just assuming that we have direct access. And because we set it up that way, I can just do if word dot contains. I think I can do that. Let's try that. Is that a valid function? Is it includes? It includes. So all I'm doing is checking to see if the string, ignore that, checking to see if the string object has that function. So for example, what I wanted to do is test.includes. Does it include an E? Yes. Does it include an X? Nah. So all we have to do is if word.contains center letter, if not word.contains center letter, return false, right? And we can simplify this even more. No, we can't. We could, but I think that's fine. So now let's try this again. This is one of the problems, right? We're not doing anything to guarantee when we're creating this list. We're not doing anything to guarantee that we can actually create a word, right? So before we get into all the problems, let's just test this one change, right? I'm not going to try that. We have to have a word with X. Don't even want to try it. Well, first let's try without the center letter. So let's come up with one where we've got a vowel outside of the center letter. So there's bull, but I'm trying not to use the center letter. Vowel? Be? Kobe. Rest in peace. Word.contains is not a function. Really? Oh, I'm supposed to do includes. That's why we did that whole test. Silly me, it's includes. Let's try again. Not a word, but let's see if... So that's invalid. We didn't even call the API yet. And I can prove that by going to the network tab. If we hit submit, you can see it's invalid. Because we're not using the center letter. Now let's add a T. And you should see, I don't know why I just pointed to my screen. Down here you should see that I'm making I'm submitting an HTTP request. Yep, I did. And you're seeing my, well, I don't know why I pointed it out, but there's my my key, my secret. So I'm going to close that. Okay, so what are our problems with this? One of the biggest things, well, there's a few big ones. One of the biggest things, though, is we are relying on somebody else's API for our game, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. In this case, we're using the free version of that API, so we can only make up to 1,000 API calls a day, which is definitely not feasible if we're trying to share this game with other people. Speaking of sharing this game with other people, this obviously isn't published at all. We could publish this, we can convert this to like a Node application and then publish that application to some service to host that server for us. And I'm blanking on the name of one of the most common ones. Let me look that up real quick. Yeah, so we could try and host this to Heroku, which, let's see if it gives us, I think it's the Heroku, it's expanded since last I used Heroku. Can I get just a concise definition of what Heroku does? Let's see. I guess I'd have to look at specific products. So let's look at the Heroku platform. It's a platform as a service based on managed container systems with integrated data services for deploying and running modern apps. The Heroku developer experience is an app-centric approach for software delivery integrated with today's most popular tools and workflows. So we could host it on Heroku or use other services like Azure, Microsoft Azure, or AWS. But we'd have to find some way of actually hosting this application so other people can find the website and use it. If we were going down, going the route of making this a web app, a web game. So that's another problem. One of the issues also is how we're validating whether or not the word we're choosing is a valid word. So I think something that would solve quite a few of our issues is, if we had our own API that takes in, so we'd make a GET request to our API that takes in a list of our random letters. So it takes in a list of these letters, and the API would spit back all of the valid words for those string of letters. And that would solve a couple problems. One of the problems would be if that doesn't give us anything, we know that this list of letters isn't valid, right? So we'd want to automatically get another list and then run that check again to see if we can actually make a word, right? The other thing is, rather than having to make an API call every time we hit submit to validate, to verify that this is actually a word, we're making that request one time and getting all of our data one time, and then we're doing all of that validation on the client side. The issue there, obviously, is what we saw with the spelling bee game, where someone can go in here and look at this game data object and view all those words. So really what we would probably want to do, I guess the most efficient thing would be to, when we first load this, make one API call with these list of letters, and then save that to some sort of cache. Whether that cache is, we're saving that in a cookie, or saving in like a Redis cache. That way when we click submit, we're communicating with that Redis cache every single time, rather than the actual web server. So those are some of the issues, but for the most part, we've got a working prototype. So if you were following along with this, congrats, feel good about it. It's fun doing this stuff. We made a game. So for the next video, I don't know if I'll continue working on this. I guess it depends on what sort of feedback this gets. If people want to see me push this further and try and publish this to Heroku, for example, and then work on making our own API. We'll see. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.